بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا والشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرض روحي وأرواحهم بالفداء ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله قوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله ولرسوله إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون صلى الله عليه وسلم. Rediscovering Islam is our ongoing topic. Tonight is lecture number 5. Yesterday we spoke a little bit about the concept of izzat in Islam. Dignity, self-respect, the respect of your fellow mu'mineen and mu'minat, and how izzat is an amanat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ, the Quran says, izzat is the exclusive property of Allah. And like I said yesterday, if we have any izzat in this world, it's because of our nisbat to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how it's vital that as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gifting us with this izzat in this world, we have no right and no business to either strip ourselves of that self-respect or strip our fellow mu'mineen of that respect as well. In today's discussion, we want to re-examine and re-look at a very special relationship, one that exists between ourselves and our amal, our deeds. The attempt has been made since day number 1 and until Friday at least, because Saturday being the day of Ashura, we will dedicate that day to the Musibat of Baba Abdullah. The last discussion on this topic will be on Friday, inshallah. And as I have been mentioning time and time again, the attempt, inshallah, with Allah's help, inshallah, is to look at Islam through a different lens now. To not be biological Muslims, to not be ijtihadi Muslims, Muslims that imitate others as they follow, but rather be Muslims that are haqiqi and actual and in essence spiritual Muslims. And to do that, sometimes we have to kind of wipe out what we've known for so many years, go back to the drawing board and rethink things through again. And of course, 9-10 days isn't enough for such a massive topic. Enough for an ashara in every single day, for all of us to have a little bit of a motivation to go back home and now reflect, rethink, ponder about these things, and then act on them, inshallah. When it comes to our deeds, one thing I want to mention right off in the beginning is sometimes we are so obsessed with the natija of our a'mal that we leave out the idea that it's a faridah on us. Sometimes we think to ourselves, there's no way that my salat will be accepted by Allah, so I don't pray salat. Sometimes I think to myself that, look, I am so sinful, I'm such a horrible human being, that even if I do fast in the month of Ramadan, it will be a hunger strike and nothing more, Allah. Allah has constantly told us that your responsibility is the faridah, my responsibility is the natija. concerned about the acceptance of your a'mal, be concerned about carrying out that a'mal. What's wajib on you is one thing, what's wajib on me is another. One area that we have an immense problem with when it comes to this idea of the natija of the a'mal is attending protests. We think to ourselves, look, me, one person attending a UN vigil will not make a difference. What's the point whether I go or not go? The dhulm in the world won't stop. The natija of this rally or any rally is not in your hands. What's the obligation on you is for you to be able to say on the day of judgment to Imam Hussein, the same cause that you gave your life for, fighting injustice, I did my best sitting in New Jersey, riding a bus to the UN 2 weeks from Friday, and sitting there and facing injustice the best way I know how. And that's the best way we can say labbaik, Ya Hussein, labbaik, right now. And so I ask all of you who are not used to attending protests, 2 weeks from this Friday, December 7th, it's been constantly announced. There's volunteers, there's sign-ups, there's buses going. It's $15. Make your voice heard. Do your a'mal and your obligation and your faridah. And inshallah, Allah will accept that a'mal. Once we understand that Islam is based on three very basic pillars. Again, these are all reminders for all of us. One is the aqidah, one is the a'mal, one is the akhlaq. Our beliefs, our actions, our morality. A Muslim is not considered a Muslim if he believes in one or only two of those pillars. Islam doesn't accept that individual that believes in Allah, believes in the Nubuwwat, believes in the Day of Judgment, fasts and prays and gives his khums and goes for Hajj, but he's a horrible human being at home, for example. His akhlaq is the worst. Or an individual who's a great human being, even prays on time, but his aqidah is weak. Or a person whose aqidah is strong and doesn't believe that I need to do a'mal because my aqidah is strong. There's many of us like that in our communities. It's enough for me to believe in Allah, they say. Why do I need to pray 5 times a day? Or fast 16 hours a day? Or give 20% of my earning? My belief is there. Allah knows it's in my heart. It's also no. 3 pillars. These 3 pillars define you as a Muslim. And of the 3, the one that's the gluest, the one that is the strongest of all of them is your amal and your deeds. You know, oftentimes when we think about our grave and our abad, we think, or we've been painted a picture sometimes of a grave that has serpents and snakes and guns, what else in there? And we think that that's what a grave is waiting for us as we enter. The grave right now is empty. If snakes and scorpions exist in your grave, it's because you brought those snakes and scorpions from this world to your grave. You created that grave for you. That grave isn't already made for you right now. And so what's important for us to understand is if anything is going to accompany us in the next world, it's our deeds and deeds alone. Our a'mal is the only thing that's our hamsafar in the next world. I'm sorry, not your children, not your wife that you spend X amount of money on, not the censor, not anything, not your work that you died for. None of that is going to come with you except for your deeds and your deeds alone. And sometimes the person that we sacrifice in this world for everything else are the a'mal that we do. We have to understand there is a direct relationship between our salvation hereafter and what we do in this world. That's why when somebody approaches our 5th Imam, Muhammad Baqir, this individual says to Imam Baqir that my life has gotten so difficult to live, Yabna Rasulullah, but I ask you to please pray for an early death for me. I want to exit this world. I'm tired of the dunya. And the 5th Imam stops him. He says, don't ever pray for a quick death from this world. In fact, pray for a prolonged life. Pray for more opportunity to gain the mercy of Allah in this world. Because once you leave this world, that book of Amal will close and the book of Hisab will begin. At that moment, there is no idea of Allah's mercy. You've done what you have to do in this world, and now you pay the benefits in the hereafter. The problem lies that sometimes our a'mal are fasli and not asli. 30 days in the month of Ramadan, from the first night of the month of Ramadan to Charanat, you don't shave anything on your face. You think to yourself, I can't shave while I'm fasting. It's haram. It might break my fast. That beard becomes fasli. The morning of Eid, mashallah, you're ready to go for salat. You're shining, your face is shining in the light. Like you just shaved in the parking lot and came and walked into the center. That amal is fasli, it's not asli. Or sometimes our salat is farishi, not arshi. I haven't heard of that. Sometimes the salat stays here, it doesn't do the mi'raj that it's supposed to do. Why? Because of riyah, lack of sincerity, so many reasons. We have to re-examine the way that we are with our a'mal, and also re-examine this idea of how do we look at our a'mal. How do we view our own deeds? Are we somebody who believes that, mashallah, I've lived a very good life, I've done excellent work, I am a true mu'min, heaven for me should be wajib? Or do I believe that even though I might have established Islam in my part of the world, I've done nothing? Ask yourself these tough questions. How do you view your own a'mal? As I mentioned on the conference in Seminar on Saturday with you, the one fear we have about death, and we have many fears about death. Even the topic sometimes sends a chill down people's backs. You can't mention death in your house. I remember I was in a community, and this brother had just come back from Karbala, and he decided to sell the kaffans that he bought from Karbala. He bought like 20 kaffans, and he announced, look, I have kaffans with Khafi Shifa on them. He was setting up a stall in the back, right by the exit. I tell you no lie, as people were leaving the hall, they would do this around the table of the kaffans. Almost as if to say, if that kaffan touches me, that's it. That's how much fear we have about death. We have to understand what that fear is and then remove it. One of the things that we have in terms of our own fear, it's such a beautiful point, is that death is that mulaqat with yourself. Oh, try to understand that point. In this world, we do our best to hide that mulaqat with ourselves. We don't want to meet ourselves. So any time that we slip and fall, we do a sin, we make an error, we are so quick to blame this person, that person, this person, we don't want to blame ourselves. In your grave, I'm sorry, it's you and your amal. At that moment, you can't blame anybody. It's a mulaqat with yourself. And you know what your haqiqat is. You can't face it in this world, you're forced to face it in your grave. And that scares us. We don't want to convince ourselves that while I put on the mask when I come to baitulqayem, I take off that mask when I'm at home. I fool the world, I don't fool myself. In the grave, that asli chehra of yours will be very, very clear to all of you. And that scares us. And so to rid us of that fear, we examine you and your amal. Because we are individuals who limit our amal to a certain time and space. When I am gone for Hajj, I have this amal. When I'm in Karbala, it's this amal. When I'm sitting in Sahla, for example, it's this amal. When I'm in, let's say, Masjid, it's this amal. During the month of Ramadan, I do this. The 10 days of Muharram, I'm this way. Every other time, I'm another way. In these mahdud times and places and days, I'm another person altogether. That amal is mahdud. That amal is dependent on the time and the place that you're at. True iman has no time and place. The month of Ramadan, the beauty of it, the miracle nature of it is what? That we believe for a moment that we don't have time to fast, we don't have time to pray, we don't have time to read the Quran, none of that. We have no time to go to the center. But the month of Ramadan, for some reason, all of this is possible. Some of you come every single day in the month of Ramadan. Otherwise, outside the month of Ramadan, you have 1,000 excuses why you're not the center. It's too far, it's too busy, the kids at school. All of those excuses exist in the month of Ramadan, and they get you here every single day. The first 10 days of Muharram, mashallah, the centers are packed with the same people, with the same complaints about the exact same program happening the first 10 days. We limit our amal to a certain time and place. Understand that for a moment. Islam has no had. You can't limit Islam to be in these four walls or during this time. True Iman is Iman anywhere you are. Whether you're sitting in baitulqayem or sitting in Mashhad, it doesn't matter. Your amal shouldn't change. But ask yourself, how many times do we tell ourselves in the month of Ramadan, if I wasn't fasting, man, I would do this. Or the moment that iftar hits, our complete schedule changes. And the example I have is for the smokers in the audience. I know you're tired of hearing this. Those of you who are chain smokers, may Allah guide you, inshallah. I really pray that you keep that habit. It's a horrible habit. But this past summer, you have a 16-hour fast. And what seemed impossible outside the month of Ramadan was very much possible in the month of Ramadan. We see the moment the Muaddin starts, Allahu Akbar, forget the kujoo, you're out there and you're lighting up. Right? My iftar is my cigarettes. What happened during the month of Ramadan? While you were fasting? And yes, I know it's difficult, but it's doable. My only point here is that we have to re-examine when and where do we put a had and a limit on our amal. Certain days of the year, certain places, our amal skyrocket. Otherwise, it's down here. We have to change that. And a lot of you will tell me that, oh, it's because of society. We've imprisoned ourselves in the West. We've imprisoned ourselves around these temptations and these distractions by shaitan. Shaitan has done this, shaitan has done it. Shaitan himself will say, وَمَا كَانَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. I don't have any sultanat over you, shaitan says. I have no authority over you. I didn't grab you by your neck and force you to do this. I simply suggested something to you. I whispered something to you. I recommended something to you. You were the one with your own ikhtiyar that chose this path. Don't come and blame me. If you want to blame me, I'm one person. 124,000 prophets you ignored. Listen to me. وَمَا كَانَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. I don't have any sultanat over you. Or we blame this society. We think, oh, we're in prison, I can't do this, I can't do that. Let me tell you a small story like that. You inshallah to make the point very clear. One salat to all of you with me inshallah tonight? Thank you. There was a family of 3 living in the US, and they had an annual tradition. That once the weather started to warm up and once the winter days were over, they would, 3 of them, the mother, the father, and the son, would go out and begin to dig up the backyard, planting their vegetable garden for the spring and summer. And this happened every single year. As the years went by, one year the father of the family wakes up, looks outside, the weather is warmed up, he grabs his tools, he goes out to the backyard, he begins to attempt to dig up the backyard. Stay with me here, please. He's a little bit older now, and it's very difficult for him to dig up the backyard, so he couldn't do it. His wife had passed away, his only son was in prison. He writes a letter to his son in prison. Says, my dear son, as you know, the weather has warmed up, and as an annual tradition, I'm out here trying to dig up the backyard. I'm unable to do so because of my weakness. I know if you were here with me, you would have helped me. Love, your father. The son replies to the father in letter and says, Dad, don't touch the backyard. That's where I buried my evidence. He reads this letter, and the moment that he reads that, there's a knock on the door. Opens the door, local sheriff, police, FBI, CIA, everybody. They storm the house, they go to the backyard, they begin digging up the backyard looking for evidence. The entire backyard is dug up. There's not a moment of evidence there. They leave completely frustrated. The father writes a letter and says, son, what was this all about? The son replies, says, Dad, you can begin planting your vegetables. That's the least I can do from where I am. We think for a moment that we're in prison. We can't do anything. We live in the West. This is not Islamic society. It's too hard. It's too hard. It's too hard. You can live in prison and still do what you want to do. You have to be a little bit smart about it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fully aware of where you are and what situation you are and your struggle and your efforts. The Quran talks constantly about struggle. لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. That man is nothing but what he strives for. Part of that is this. Being in this society. It's very difficult. I tell my youth all the time. The battle that you guys are fighting, no one else is fighting in the world right now. To preserve your deen in this society is very difficult. I've been there. I'm still going through it. It doesn't mean we roll over and say, oh, the mahal is not right. Nor does it mean that you board a one-way flight to Pakistan or India or anywhere else and say, I'm going to save my kids in that area. That mahal sometimes is more kharab than this mahal is. And as I said to my youth on Saturday, that the idea is not for us to leave here. The idea it is for us to remain within Fir'aun's kingdom and be that Musa. That's what we need. We don't need you to leave. Unfortunately, the world has gotten to a point where there is no safe corner right now for any moment. It's a sign of the zuhur of the Imam. We have a hadith. A moment is not able to find one corner of this world for sukoon, itminan, serenity. Is that not happening right now? Or my youth who are from this city, from this country, do you feel like you're from this country? Or are you made to feel alien and different and apart? Of course you are. So these excuses of our amal are slowly fading away. But struggle and strive when it comes to your amal. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهِدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا مَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, the Quran says. For those who struggle in our path, فِينَا, in our path, the result of that is لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. The path of Allah will open bit by bit. But just rolling over and dying and saying, Shaitan, come get me, Mahal, come get me, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. Because part of the reason is the way that we view our own a'mal. Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wa salam, in his Du'a Maqam al-Akhlaq, which I would recommend all of you, so once in a while revisit and recite. There's transitions online, of course. There's apps now for your iPhone. I mean, it's pretty much, it can be in your pocket whenever you want it to be. In there, there's a very beautiful saying. He says, وَالْبِسْمِ زِينَةَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Oh Allah, clothe me with the beauty of the pious. And then he lists 21 different characteristics of the muttaqin. 21. I don't have time to mention all 21. 2 of them for tonight is sufficient for me, inshallah, for all of you. He says part of that list is what? Istiqlal al-khayr, istighfar al-shar. Oh, it's a very difficult position. To look at your khayr, your goodness, as qaleel, and look at your shar and evil as kathir. Exaggerate the evil that you do to yourself and minimize the good that you do to yourself. It sounds easy enough. We do the complete opposite, at least I do. The moment we do any good act, we want the world to know it. We have another hadith that says that that act that is done in the utmost secrecy holds the utmost reward. The act that's done where only you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are fully aware of that act. No one else saw you do it. No one else even knows that you did it. Allah knows that you did it. And you did an amazing act with the utmost sincere intention. But that nafs of ours, that ego of ours, that ujb inside of us is pricking at us and pricking at us. We want to tell somebody what I did. And you wait for someone to somehow bring up some topic so you can somehow slip it in there that that's what I did. And some people are masters at it. They're talking about a completely different topic. This man will pull that topic towards him, mention that I did this, get a little bit of applause and praise, and he's happy. And that's how we did it. That one act that was the source of pleasure for Allah has now become a riyah inside of you. Be very, very careful. At the same time, when we commit a sin, when we make a mistake, we minimize that sin inside of us. We think to ourselves, it's not a big deal. There are other people I know who have done far worse than I have. These little small white lies and small mistakes, everyone does it. I'm not ma'asum. Or I'm a young guy, I have time to ask Allah for forgiveness. So you convince yourself. And the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen is very clear for us. That sin that in your eyes you convinced is minor has become major in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Sajjad said it's not about the size of your sin, it's about whose law you're breaking. That's our ego talking. We simply don't want to accept the fact that we have problems inside of us. We have a mariz and a biman and a sick soul. It needs treatment. You wake up in the morning. You have a little bit of a kink in your neck. Right? Your neck doesn't feel right. You don't rush to the hospital and say, doctor, my neck hurts. I slept on it. You'll think to yourself, look, I slept wrong. Maybe my pillow was too high or something happened. By noon, by 1, it'll be gone. If you wake up and you feel some tingling in your arm sometimes, maybe you slept on it, and a couple hours it'll be fine. But if God forbid, you wake up and there's tightness in your chest, you're short of breath, you're sweating for no reason, you have enough knowledge of your body to know this is not normal. You can do, to some extent, some self-diagnosis of your body. You have enough awareness of your body. Do we have that amount of awareness about our soul as well? Are we able to first self-diagnose ourselves and say, look, I shouldn't be like this? Every person is telling me that you're an impatient individual, you're always angry, you're snapping at people, you're never happy. I've been hearing this now for 30, 40 years, so I stop and think maybe I have a problem inside of me. And then go to the right doctors to get a nuskha and a prescription to be able to conquer that disease. We have to be able to self-diagnose our problems. We have to be able to recognize that our relationship with our a'mal, those a'mal of ours, isn't made to big ourselves up. It's not meant to inflate the ego a little bit, so we're walking around like this, saying, I've done this, I've done this, I've done that. You've done nothing. They say there's a man who lived beside a masjid. And for 30 years, for every single salat in Jamaat, he came and he sat right behind the Imam of the Jamaat. Every single salat. One day he came late. He ended up at the back row of the Jamaat. And he said to himself, I now realize that for all those years, I've been reading salat for the wrong reasons. I've now discovered sincerity in my amal. Your deeds are all you have, my brothers and my sisters. You'll be judged solely based on your deeds. There'll be some deeds that you take with you to your grave. There'll be other deeds that you leave behind, inshallah, that will benefit you as they live, including your awlad and your children. Again, it requires a completely different topic altogether on how to do tarbiyat of your children in the West. It's a big issue that we have. Some of our parents are lucky And I say this very bluntly. Now, this is day 5. I'm with all of you. You should know that I'm a very blunt individual. And the bluntness of the statement is this, that a lot of my parents who have come from the East, I'm sorry, they came very confused. They had no idea how to raise a Western child. And so they kind of guessed and estimated. And some of you got really, really lucky where you end up with amazing children. And it's not because of effort from you, I'm sorry to say. It's because the kids were able to fight out the demons themselves. And some of you are excellent parents. And were able to figure out the system very, very well. But we are trying to ensure that even though I am long gone, everything here stays with me. That's why when it comes to this idea of a parent-child relationship, the amount of emphasis placed on the mother in every family is enormous. Islam, in this regard, is not politically correct. It's very biased. It's very, very biased. It gives a clear advantage to the mother. And somewhere later on is the father's role in all this. When someone approached our Holy Prophet, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and asked him that after you, O Holy Prophet, who should I serve? The Prophet says, your mother. He asked a second time, who else? He says, your mother. A third time, who else? He says, your mother. And then your father. 3 times mother, then your father. Another man comes to the Holy Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, I took my mother for Hajj. She couldn't walk. I carried her on my shoulders for the entire time of Hajj. Safa, Marwa, Tawaf, everything. Was I able to pay her back for everything that she did for me when I was a child? The Prophet says, by Allah, not one night did you repay her. What she did out of complete unconditional love for you. What you're doing, you're trying to pay her back for something. These are mothers. And we take our mothers for granted. We're scared of our fathers, but our mothers we take for granted. The same mother, Imam Sajjad says in his Bill of Rights. And I know it's not my topic about mothers and fathers, but I'm going somewhere with this. Stay with me, inshallah. Our fourth Imam in his treatise on rights talks about the right of a mother. If you've read that, you know he says the right of the mother is to know that she went sleepless so you could sleep. That she went hungry so you could eat, thirsty so you could drink. And then he says that she stood in the sun while you laid in the shade. The same mother who, when you leave every single morning, you may not hear her, but under her breath she has du'as for you. Until you come back safely, the du'as don't stop. The same mother who, when you walk in the house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you think you're very, very quiet, she's not asleep. Not until she knows every single one of her kids are safe and sound in their room. The same mother who would give you taza food and eat the basi in the fridge. And she would tell you that, no, I just cooked this food today. The same mother who would sacrifice everything to make sure that you're well, that you're healthy, that you're sound, that you're alive. That sometimes the same mother who, when you walk in the way you say salam to your mother, she's able to recognize something isn't right. And she'll probe you and probe you and probe you until you break down and tell her. And she'll give you a simple hug and say, it's going to be okay, Delran. And everything all of a sudden vanishes. The same mother who, if you live away from her, like I do for 10 months out of the year, she'll simply say that Jahan behold for sure. That's it. I don't need you right beside me. I just need you happy wherever you are. It's the fitrat of the mother to put herself at danger to ensure your safety. That's why when you think about the mothers of Karbala, it's something else. When we think about those mothers who not only were okay with sending their children to the battlefield, they would actually get them ready for the battlefield. At that moment now, Hussein's mission, Hussein's life, Hussein's entire maqsad and purpose far exceeds and overrides my own fikrat. Now my pride and my love for you is, will you be able to sacrifice your life for Hussein? Hussein is out there defending Islam. I want my kids to defend Hussein. That's why the biggest fear of any mother in Karbala was that all of the ashab of Imam Hussein gave their life and my children were left alive after Ashura. Can you imagine? To my mothers who are listening, can you imagine at what state you have to be at, what yaqeen, at what iman you have to be at, to be able to see your children as an avenue of salvation through their sacrifice. It's one thing, and you've heard these masayib your entire life. And one thing you know for sure, and it could be said, that the amount of love that Bibi Zainab had for her own children, she had more love for Hussein's children. What was more difficult for her than watching Maulana Muhammad go into the Maidan of Karbala was to watch Ali Akbar go into the Maidan of Karbala. But this ajib relationship between a brother and a sister, we'll talk about Ali al-Ashura, was something else. It was a two-way street. If Bibi Zainab loved Imam Hussein's children more than her own, Imam Hussein loved her children more than his own. That's why one thing that we don't realize, how difficult it must have been for Imam Hussein to watch his nephews, Maulana Muhammad, go towards the Maidan of Karbala. And when Muhammad approaches Imam Hussein and says, give me ijazat Mahmud to go into the Maidan of Karbala to sacrifice ourselves, he didn't say yes right away. They went back to the Khaymadah and they pleaded with their mother and said, Mama, he said this thing to us, can you convince him? They said, approaches Imam Hussein and says, Mahir, do you remember in Jang Siffin when Abbas was very small and young Abbas? And when he fought in Siffin, we were so proud of Abbas. We were so proud, we were glowing with pride. Why are you stripping me from that pride when it comes to my own sons? Give them ijazat. And we see that in the Khaymadah themselves, Bibi Zainab is getting them ready, putting on the armor, explaining to them that look, you go out there, you make me proud, you sacrifice for Islam, I'll be right here waiting for you. And if you get to Furat, understand, I know you're thirsty, but your Ali Askar is equally as thirsty. Don't think about quenching your own thirst. This is a mother talking to her sons. When they finally approach Imam Hussein and says, Mama, we are now ready. He then says, go back and get permission from your mother. They then said, it's Allah who sent us here. Ready for war. At that moment, Bibi Zainab gives a small box to Imam Hussein. He opens the box and there are 2 green amulets. These were the grandsons of Haidar Karan after all. You have to enter the Maidan in a certain look. He put on these small amama on both their heads. How difficult must it have been for Imam Hussein? Mounted him on the horse and watched him go in. And they fought like the grandsons of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But the enemies separated both of them, and one by one attacked them. When they fell from the horse, they turned back and said, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. At that moment, Abbas and Hussein ran towards the Maidan. Brought the bodies back to this Khaymadah. Now everybody was there waiting for Zainab's reaction. The khayma got opened up and very slowly Bibi Zainab walks out. Lying there in front of her is Ona Muhammad. She kneels down between Ona Muhammad. She places one hand on the chest of Muhammad. She places one hand on the chest of Ona. She falls down to sajda and says, Ya Allah, accept this qalila hadiyah on my behalf. And after that, the book says she never cried for Muhammad. She never once grieved over Muhammad. She sacrificed them for Hussein. But when she returned back to Medina, and she opened that door, and she entered that house, and she went to the room where Ona Muhammad used to pray salat, and she saw these two small janawazes, she said, Allah, come give me voice over my two sons. So, Ya Rabbi,